to a Renaissance Room podcast. Welcome back to the Renaissance Room podcast. And in today's episode, today is Sunday. It is August 20th, and I have been resting. But the beautiful thing about this rest is that it has allowed me to really collect my thoughts. You know, I think sometimes when we're dealing with anxiety and things like that, we're so quick to kind of take it on as an identity and feel as though we have to work to fix it. When a lot of times, you know, when it comes to mental illness and mental health, I will never, I'm never going to sit here and try to like make it seem like it's not something that's real. And I don't want to come at it from a very insensitive, approach. But a lot of times, you guys, it's so circumstantial. You know, I think about the times in my life where I was in therapy and I was diagnosed with something, but I was in therapy because I was going through a really, really hard time. You know what I mean? And like, even though my therapist was like, okay, you have this, right? At first, it felt like, okay, this is something I want to take on. But one thing I've kind of found, and this is why I think it's so important to be mindful of like identity and what you identify as, even if you do have certain mental health issues. And I don't want to, like I said, I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I want to kind of talk to you about something that's helped me, because I know for myself, there were some things that was going on with me. But the moment that I started to really identify with that, you know what I mean? That was the moment where I kind of found myself really making a lot of excuses for myself, and not excuses to where it's like, wow, Jalen, you're really not giving yourself the space to feel, but more so like now you're really kind of just giving up because you feel like now you have a valid reason to not pursue the thing that you want to do or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? And so for me, getting back on track and like really changing my mindset and like really realizing like it's so important to be mindful what you identify as, because it can change you. And I think over time, it kind of alters how you show up. And I don't really know if that's what you want for yourself for the long term, So it's like important to know if you're going through something in life, man, you have to give yourself permission to feel. You guys know that I'm someone who's very emotional. I think at this point in my writing career, I've kind of got to a point where I realize how my emotions have just been horrible. And I think when we talk about imposter syndrome, for me, it was really just something to where it's like, I didn't feel like an imposter, but I genuinely did not feel ready for certain things. And I just did not want to have those things, so soon. And I didn't really care what anyone had to say about like, oh, you deserve it. And you guys know, I kind of critique that aspect of our culture because you really don't, like you really should work to try to prove yourself and not coming from a place of emptiness, but coming from a space of like wholeness. You should work to be better at your craft. You should be proud to have, your hard work pay off and years put into your craft. And like, I truly believe this, when it comes to imposter syndrome, you really only feel like an imposter because you didn't do the work. We talk about privilege, we talk about different things like that. Okay, that's fine. But I think that you have to be honest with yourself, because I can honestly say I've never really felt like an imposter. I think there's been times where I definitely felt like I was not prepared, right? I've been in situations where I felt like I wasn't prepared, but a lot of that was due to, me really kind of ascribing to the idea that you'll never be perfect and you should go for it anyway. I even think about some of the columns that I've written that are just blatantly not racist, but just prejudice, and really coming from a very like ignorant space and an emotional space and a space that's very removed and a little bit, it's just very bothersome. I mean, honestly, looking back, it's like I always used to do this thing where I would go back and I would delete my trash work. But I don't know. I don't know if it's like, I just kind of want to be real and like just grow, and you know what I mean? But yeah, like I look back over my life and it's like, no, take your time, take your time, put in the work, make the mistakes, say the stupid things, write the very emotional, columns or whatever the case may be. And like, you'll get there, and I think for me, finally, for the first time, and I think this is another thing too, like not giving yourself those limitations. I feel like with the internet, if you can find a way to really use it to your benefit and use it and engage in a way that is very responsible, it can really be a very powerful tool. I found for myself, been in prayer, in prayer, significantly mourning, not having a support system that I felt like really supported me in my goals, in my dreams, and all these different things. And I just kind of got to a point in my life where I'm like, okay, how long are you going to wallow in this narrative? Because this has been your truth, right? That's very true for me. I've never had that, but it's like, okay, how long, are we going to sit here in this space and be at this place of zero? What are you going to do about it? And I think I say this all the time, but like following your passion in terms of like allowing it to be the thing that guides you to the people, right? I believe in that. And I think that it kind of took a little tweaking in my perspective, and it took a little bit more faith. But I started to really believe that if I just stay the course, I'll meet the right people and the right people will show up. And I really feel as though that's kind of what's happening for me right now. I really feel as though, me knowing, having dreams, having goals. Let me just say goals, right? Because I think honestly, at this point, as I get older, I can definitely say that I have goals. I have more goals than I have dreams. I think there was definitely a point in my life where I was very much this artistic dreamer, and I wrote about it on my column. Me feeling as though I was regretting being a writer. And really, the regret came from what a lot of people don't tell you about this very cool kind of like entrepreneurial type of thing, especially in our generation where education is so anti, and we're so against education, and we're so against any, normal or conventional path. We're very much anti that. We like the spontaneity of everything, but no one really tells you the challenges of it. And I'm not saying there's challenges in being a business owner, because I really hate narratives like that. I really do, because I just think that being that the world is so, the culture, the younger generations, right? My generation, we are so entrepreneurial in our, creative ways of being and work and things like that. I just think that you can't constantly critique every little aspect of everything, because I just think, okay, where's the medium, right? Where's the middle ground? What's the constant? If it's don't go to college, don't start a bit, what are we really what are we really teaching younger people? What is the narrative, right? And so I just think that it gets kind of lost on us when we just so anti this and so anti that. I can't stand it. So that's not really my take, but more so my take is that there's really something said about having a life where there's no direction. There's really something said about this idea of being this solo dreamer and being a writer, and you're doing your freelance thing, but you don't really have any direction. You don't have any connections. You're not really in the spaces, depending on where you live. Obviously, if you're in New York, I think you'll have a way better shot at being a freelance writer versus living in Ohio like myself. But you just kind of get to a point where it's there's so much that really goes into that. And I think if you don't really have something anchoring you, if you don't have a constant, if you don't have a job in which you're working and writing or whatever the case may be, you're just going to find yourself really kind of sailing and following away. And I think for me, it really got to the point where I just kind of felt this is the thing, right? That's the thing. And so I was kind of just in a very sunken space, and I just was really feeling very regretful about pursuing this path, because I was getting older. And again, for me, I tell you guys this all the time, I think your inner critic can be your friend. I don't think you should completely 86. But I just kind of got to a point where I was just, realizing that, I put a lot of time in this, and had I had put that same time and energy into something that was a little bit more secure, or a little bit, something that was a little bit more guaranteed, I would have been a lot more happier, with my birthday upcoming, just because I just really felt as though, I've drifted and I've done so many different things. But, that's the thing, when you sow so many different seeds and you got your hands in everything, you don't really have that one tangible thing. And I think for myself, as I get older, learning about my personality, I'm someone who kind of likes to work hard at one thing and see the results of that one thing. This lifestyle that I've kind of adopted and was kind of lured into through American society, right? Which is the pursue the dream, the ideas of entertainment, right? I realized that for me, I would much rather live a life that's a little bit more stable, a life that's a little bit more, and people say, oh, there are no guarantees. Yeah, I know. But if you're a doctor, there are actually some guarantees, so, and you guys know, I talked about this in the college episode. College is, it's a very unfortunate thing in the Black community where it's not encouraged. And to be honest, I look at other cultures, And I think that there's really something said about our culture, because this is the only culture where it's not heavily encouraged. This is actually the only culture where it's heavily discouraged. And I understand the spirit of entrepreneurship in Black people. I understand that, but I just think that there's a lot that really goes into that. And I just, you can get lost in that, and you'll look up and it's like you have nothing. And the people who are telling you not to go have nothing, right? And so it takes a lot to kind of unlearn and relearn and get into the right spaces and use things for your benefit. So I thank God where I am right now. I could definitely say that I feel very much more in alignment. Well, what's for me, I feel a lot more grounded. I think by giving my life to Christ in 2022, things have been different, but I feel a lot more grounded. I feel a lot more in alignment with what it is that I really want to do and, where I am. And I feel as though now, having goals, it just creates a stronger foundation for me, hitting those goals and so forth versus kind of being in this space in my life where it's just wow, we're going to wing it. We're going to dream. We're going to, you know what I mean? But versus no, we're going to take the steps necessary. So it's great. But I wanted to kind of talk about the idea of racism, and let's not get too philosophical here. So I wanted to talk about racism. I wanted to talk about racist, and I had wrote a column about this, and that's why I was saying it was just kind of cringe looking back on it. You guys, I've always kind of felt when it comes to racism, it's really rooted in ignorance. It's really just rooted in ignorance. You genuinely don't know any better. I talk about this all the time, white culture, and how there is a culture and it is white culture. And a lot of people don't look into that. And I think that that's really just due to the superiority of being a white person in America, so you don't really look into white culture. You'll study Hispanic culture, you'll study Black culture, you'll study all these different cultures, but you don't really look into the white experience and white psychology and white culture. But there's a difference there, and there's foundational differences, and there's foundational ideologies that are then passed down. And so, for me, being a writer, obviously it was I think looking back, we can, if you're a writer and you're a reader, you're going to overcome this, right? You're going to overcome these prejudices, in terms of other people. It doesn't mean that the world is going to change or that people aren't going to be racist. No, I think that the battle for justice is going to be a long one. But, because there'll always be injustice, because you just can't control people. And again, there's a lot of ignorance, but I think the more people are educated and I think the more people are enlightened, I think that we will see less of that. But yeah, man, I just kind of realized for myself, it's really rooted in ignorance. And, that goes for anybody. I think for a lot of people, it's just a lack of education. It's a lack of exposure, and it's just cultural ignorance. So that's what I think about racism. That's what I think about racist. And I just think that there's something so freeing about accepting the world. I just heard Dr. Stephanie actually say that. I just followed her on Instagram. She's great. Love her family. They're awesome. Her and her husband, Bishop. So inspiring, seriously. But I heard her say that, she said the moment that you just kind of accept that this is the way the world is, it changes you. You're not oh my God, I have to, you're not so upset by the injustice. And I think that that's something that's very, very important. And it's very powerful because, I was reading The Rage of Innocence by Kristen Hennings, and she talked about that, right? How for the Black youth, they need ways to express the frustrations that they feel in regards to the injustice. And if they get an opportunity to express it, then they'll be able to transform that energy and realize that, okay, it's just, this is a system. This is not to be taken out against white individuals or people who I feel are wronging me or whatever the case may be. You can start to look at it from a different perspective in terms of systemic racism, because that's really what it is. And I thought that was just super powerful. And I realized for myself, healing through childhood trauma, right? Going back, doing the work on myself and so forth. I found myself in that space, but it was unfortunate because I was 25, right? So it's I'm not really in that space. And I think that that's probably one of the things that I was also grieving and mourning and kind of regretting, because I'm man, because you don't have those foundational opportunities, or you don't have that strong foundation, you kind of get there a little bit later in life. And that's also a reason why too, I've been very slow to kind of critique current culture, the lack of role models and so forth, because for so many people, the foundation just was broken. So you get older in life and yeah, you should be at a different space, right? But it's not necessarily a matter of age appropriation. It's more so just like, you've really kind of had to get it out the mud, and you're learning and you're growing, and like it just changes you, you know, like you're changing as you grow and as you learn, but it's different. Your path looks very different. So I found that to be true for myself. And so instead of, being 25 and expressing, the disdain for the systems and the institutions, I'm looking at the individuals. And, I just think that there's really something said about fundamentals and foundations, and how it's very important to have certain processes at certain ages of a child's development, because I think that really helps for a healthy individual, and it really helps you in relationships and just how you show up. I get it. No one's perfect. Yeah, I know. But it makes a huge difference. So anyway, I think that's all I wanted to say today. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. Obviously, we've got a long way to go, but life feels very good. It feels very good. It also feels great to have ideas and to know where it is that I want to go, but allow myself to kind of grow in my craft and creatively, and just really take my time one step at a time. I think by being bombarded with so many different things, that also can really lead to a lot of mental health issues. You should really take your time. And when I say take your time, I mean just do one thing at a time. Don't try to do several things at a time, and realize that you're going to get old, and that's a beautiful thing, because you'll still have time to pursue things. Life is always about learning. And if you're curious enough, then, you'll maintain your sense of courage, so you can start that business at a later time. You don't have to start it right now, alongside of all the other things that you're dealing with. So yeah, life is about balance. I'm learning that as well. It's definitely I notice for myself, when there's too much on my plate, one thing really slacks off. And because I'm someone who values fitness, I value health, I value spirituality, and I value really just reading and learning and educating myself, and again, getting better at my craft. And, so much of it for me is a matter of potential. I really want to manifest that potential that's within me. I'm not someone who's it's okay, you're in your 20s, it's okay. I don't feel that way. I really love to be challenged. I love to be challenged. I love being able to rise to the occasion and go above and beyond exceedingly. I don't really think it's a matter of proving anything. I think it's just a matter of I'm 100% capable, and I want to do it to the best of my ability, and I want to go above and beyond, and I genuinely want to be the best at what it is that I'm doing here. So it's so much more than that for me. But I feel so grateful. I really do. I feel so grateful. I look forward to getting my 5 miles in, by the end of this year. I look forward to learning and growing and traveling, and really just kind of getting in alignment with what's for me, and narrowing my focus. I think that's another thing too about your 20s. It's really chaotic, because you're trying a lot of different things, and you're figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And now that I'm almost out of my 20s, I feel very grateful. I feel very grounded. I feel a lot more stable. And I thank God for that, because I really did pray for stability. I'm oh my God, I lived my 20s. I was all over the place. And now lessening that, just kind of being a little bit more calm and being a little bit more thorough and disciplined and diligent on the one thing. It's completely given me so much peace in terms of my professional and external life. You know what I mean? Internally, of course, meditation, maintaining prayer, taking care of my health. Health for me it's one of those, it just comes natural. And I don't know if I've ever developed a habit. I think a big part of me taking care of my body and eating healthy kind of stems from just having that self-love, because I think for me, well, yeah. And being attuned to your body, you know when you eat something and it just doesn't feel right. So you just probably stop eating it. I think if you know that something's not good for you and you keep doing it, I think that that's a very sure sign that you've got some internal work that you need to work on, and it's really that simple. I don't really think it's a matter of oh, you need to just change your eating habits, or, and I don't want to get so surface level and talk about diet, because I think that they're all, interconnected and interwoven in there, like mind, body, and soul. But I really do believe that. And, I was out, I was like, oh my God, I went to Myers the other night when I got off of work. And I was like, I want something sweet. Like, oh my God, I just want something sweet. And I literally went to go pick up strawberries. And like, as I was checking out, I was like, wow, that's so funny. Cause usually I would go and I would get like ice cream. But when I was eating ice cream, I noticed that I was like, okay, something's up, because the way my stomach was feeling whenever I would like really heavily indulge in dairy, I was like, I can't eat this anymore. So obviously, they have alternative options like dairy-free ice creams and things like that, but that shit's expensive. So like, I'm not buying it right now, like depending on where we're at in the budget, of course, come on. Like, it's not like OD or anything like that, but I mean, it's like $6 for a pint. So it's like, I don't know. So the strawberries are much more affordable, but I just kind of noticed myself innately gravitating towards that. And that really said a lot to me when I was just kind of like observing myself, like, oh, wow, we're not going to get ice cream, but yeah, like you learn your body and you learn what doesn't feel good, and you stop doing that to yourself because it's like you love yourself enough, So by simplifying my life, by unlearning and always relearning, I think that that's the coolest part about birthdays and age. And for me, I really, really take a deep introspective, and like being 25, coming into 26, it's one of those things where it's like, they say that your brain, like cognitively, it fully develops at 25. Like you can actually cognitively reason at 25. And I think for me, that's also what's really helped me, because it's like, I find myself being a lot more chill now, like just a lot more grounded, a lot more mellow, but more so just like in the most beautifulest way. Like I really feel like a strong sense of security, within myself. And like, that's beautiful. And I thank God for that. Cause like I said, that's your 20s, right? Like, you're all over the place. And so when I started thinking about how I want to spend the rest of my 20s, I said that when I turned 25, I was like, no, I really want to 100% dedicate myself to something, whether that's the craft or whatever the case may be. I was like, I really do not want to find myself in this space where it's like, I'm just still like, I don't, like this chaos, I felt like for myself, because I was such a tenacious person and I was so curious and I was just like really led to do a lot of fun stuff in my early 20s. I graduated at 17, but like, being in college, 17, 18, so forth, I was like, okay, I've tried a lot of different things. So I think for me, when it came to 25, I was like, I'm ready to kind of put some years in on one specific thing and just kind of watch that thing grow. And so that's why I think I'm very grateful. I feel a huge sense of content, stability, faith, prayer, just the whole nine. I feel very good, and I feel at peace when I start looking at things from a very small scale and like small goals and just working towards that. It feels great, and I'm very grateful. So I feel grown. That's what it's giving. It's giving grown, and I look forward to just working on new different things. I never knew where writing could take you. I think it was, I know it was it might have been, I think it was either the magic of, no, it was either the magic of positive thinking or positive, it was one of those books. But I remember when he said that, sometimes we're doing something and we're bored and we're not interested in what it is that we're doing. But he's like, if you can learn more about it, you'll be more interested in it. And that's kind of how I felt as a writer. First, I was like, okay, this column thing, like having a column, having a podcast, this is great. Writing a book, writing poetry, right? That was kind of like the start of it. But then you start to realize like, oh, there's documentaries, right? There's interdisciplinary studies that go into this, right? Things like psychology, sociology, things that I've always loved. I took a sociology class once in high school, and like, it just changed my life. I absolutely loved it. But yeah, like you start to look at, the different, and then art, right? Art as well. You start to look at cinematography, photojournalism. And then it's like, you really kind of just find yourself like, wow, this is great. And I think that's one of the things that I love about journalism and being a journalist, pursuing journalism, is because it's such a flexible career, and like nothing ever really looks the same. I'm not really someone who enjoys routine in my day-to-day life. I like the foundational things that I do, right? Like eating lunch at a certain time. I feel like, that's just my thing. Like, okay, around this time, I want to kind of decompress. I want to eat lunch. I want to go for a walk, or, going to bed at a certain time. I want to read my books at a certain time. I want to light my candles, right? I want to do some self-care. I want to read. I want to write. Like, you know what I mean? Not those things that you do every day that just, that's your routine as you're human, like you're human, right? Like, in your real life. But more so routine is like at work. I hated routine work. And throughout all the jobs I've had over like 30 jobs, I realized I don't like routine work. I can't just get here and show up and it's the same thing every day, because I feel like I'm not being challenged and this is boring. And like my brain, I feel like cognitively, I have the ability to do a lot more than just this very routine thing every day. Like this is not the vibe. I think routine work is no. And I think, there was times in my life where I really liked routine work because I felt like, it was kind of nice to not be overwhelmed and, stressed out at work. I was like, okay, this is great. I get to go to work and I get to focus on this one thing. And, I like that there's not a lot of stress here. But, you go through seasons in life and you're healthy and you're like, okay, yeah, no, what's next? You know what I mean? So that's one thing I loved about pursuing this career. And so in the end, because I've kind of just rambled and more so provided a lot of observations of myself. But I think in the end, in all of it, I can honestly say that it's 100% worth it. Like I am grateful that I really did make the choice to pursue being a writer. Like I don't have any regrets in terms of like pursuing this passion of mine, this gift of mine. I don't have any regrets. I think sometimes it does feel like the rewards are minuscule depending on where you are in your writing career, depending on the experience. But I think when I think about the lifestyle that being a writer provides, and when I think about the back end, right, the things that really matter, like having conversations, engaging in philosophy, engaging in critical theory, and like that to me is so beautiful, right? And also the art aspects of it. I don't really know any writers who are not extremely artistic and very creative. There's just so much freedom in that. And then I also think too, for me, interwoven in my passions and my gifts in entrepreneurship, right? Like there's just, it's something that to me, I think it's very rewarding because it's honestly something that allows me to show up and be myself. And I don't feel like I'm boxed in, right? You can write so many different things, right? So I don't feel like I'm boxed in. I feel the power in being able to give a voice to the voiceless. God talks about that in Proverbs 31, like, giving a voice to the voiceless. And I feel that, I really do. I remember when I wrote that column, I deleted it and reposted it, and I still have regrets to it to this day. I think at the time I was kind of struggling with being seen and I was very insecure, but I got top writer in the NFL on Medium and I deleted the column like a very insecure person. So I reposted it. It didn't do as well. I think timing is everything in journalism, especially when you're publishing a story. Obviously, I was talking about Damar Hamlin and T. Higgins, so that was like a year ago. You know what I mean? So I completely fumbled my little accolade there. I'm not gonna lie, I was very salty. But yeah, I was so upset because I felt like a lot of the journalists have bombarded T. Higgins with speculations about, did you do this or did you do that? And how did you show up? And, T. Higgins is this. And I was so mad about it because I just felt like looking at the game and doing the study and the research on the NFL and the commonalities of the game and the violence and these situations that take place. I didn't feel like any journalist looked into the industry and they really kind of were like attacking T. Higgins. And I just felt like I was just so upset. So, I felt like being able to write that column and stick up for him in a sense. It was one of those things where it was like I felt very proud of that work, and I was acknowledged, like I said, as one of the top writers in the NFL on Medium. So I thought that was pretty cool. And so there's a lot of rewards, and I think that it's small rewards, but I think one thing I've learned in life is like, it's an equal give and take, and sometimes it feels like it's not that. But when I really look at my life, I look at my career, when I think about long term, it's going to be very rewarding. I've done a lot of things and I'm still doing a lot of things and I'm watering those seeds. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's great. And, that's why I say too, like with imposter syndrome, I think getting a little bit too soon for me. Like even being awarded as the top writer in the NFL, though I did research the column, obviously I had to do like a little research in regards to the NFL, but I still just kind of felt like, oh wow, like, you know, for me, that was imposter syndrome. But I think having like certain extreme accolades, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that sometimes if it comes a little too soon, you're kind of suspicious of it, I guess. And I guess at the time, the self-esteem and a lot of things kind of played into me not feeling worthy of that recognition for that work. But no, man, like it really made sense because I did do a lot of research in regards to the NFL, and to get the reward for the column, it really did make sense. So anyway, I don't even know what this podcast is about. I guess I'm more so just encouraging you, like, if you're a writer, to keep going. I don't really think you need that, though. Like, because, you know, I really feel like a writer writes, you know, and if you really want to be a writer, you're going to write regardless. You know, I think for myself, even when one thing about me, I'm going to express my feelings. So I'll say like, oh my God, do I regret being a writer? Or, you know what I mean? And it's never really for sympathy. It's just more so for mere expression. But I'll never give up. I've already made up my mind that this is what I was going to do. And I think for me, it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, if you've ever, like, you know, people talk about relationships, this is a very good example, right? These are all interconnected. You talk about relationships. If you invest so much time in something, you're not about to just walk away. You know what I mean? And that's how I feel about writing. I've invested too much into writing to just be able to like walk away and be like, okay, I'm not going to be a writer anymore. Absolutely not. You know, so I express my feelings. I express the frustration. I express, you know, my concerns, seeing the writer strikes and seeing how writers aren't paid. And you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I can never just like be like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm walking away from this. You know what I mean? Especially being that there's just so much opportunity and there's so many different things to do and you get better with time. I want to see the return on that investment. You know what I mean? Because I'm dedicated. So dedicate yourself to your craft, dedicate yourself to something, you know, and I think that will really bring you a sense of peace and clarity in your life. You know, I know a lot of times people are like, oh, you know, go with the flow, figure it out. God's got a plan. I know all of that, but like God's put things in your heart for a reason. And, you know, you have certain gifts that you need to pursue. You know, that's where you're going to find your stability, your clarity, your people, and so forth. You know, seeing other writers on Instagram, right? Just randomly, all different races, right? Engaging with people who enjoy the same things as me, right? Like literally, we all pretty, like, I feel like for most part, most writers, we really like the same things. I remember meeting with my copywriter, senior editor, and like, we like very simplistic, you know what I mean? But like, we may invest in like a really nice pen or like a nice, you know what I mean? Like it's those little things, like the comfort of a home and like, you know, I don't know. I just think that there's really something said about the work that you do and sometimes the people that you meet who also align with the same values as you, you know? And like I said, it doesn't always have to be that way. I don't think that you have to like, I don't necessarily think that doctors have to marry doctors or writers have to marry writers or whatever the case may be. But when we see that, I mean, we can kind of see why, because a lot of times there's, you know, other people may also value activism, right? They may also value storytelling. They understand the importance of it. So it's like there's a sense of understanding there that I think really helps in the long term as far as compatibility, because now you don't really have, you know, you have this basis. You don't really have to get over that hump because it's like you have there's a lot of likeness here. Okay. So yeah, hope you guys have a great day. That was just something I've learned about race, about racism. I'm so grateful to be able to kind of grow. And I remember when I was first coming into this space, I was writing a lot about, you know, racism and things like that when I first started my column. And I remember critiquing some of the educated writers and the scholars who wrote about race and racism. I felt like they did it in a way that was very conservative and it just was very like, you know, and I was like, oh, they're just not telling the truth, you know, but the truth is that you get to a point where it's like you develop disciplinaries to where you can talk about systemic and institutionalized racism without being racist or offensive or blatantly offensive in your work. You know, you can actually enlighten and educate and inspire while not putting down the people who, you know, obviously are of a different race, right? People who are white, people who are whatever nationality. And, you know, you can write and you can talk about your activism, but you don't have to put them down in the process. You know, you don't have to like generalize in the process, you know, but it takes time. And I think that I critiqued it so heavily, but I realized that was a skill. You know, I also had to really overcome kind of like my sore loser, my jealousy, kind of like, perspectives. You know, a big part of it for me was just, it was a lot. You know, honestly, looking back, I really felt like I didn't have community. I had made certain, you know, decisions in regards to institutionalized learning. I had a very negative perspective in regards to college and a lot of the resources that probably could have helped me. So I think seeing other people with those resources, you kind of find yourself in that very immature like state where you're critiquing it, but you really want to be a part of it. So you have to be mindful of that as well. I definitely had to overcome that sore loser mentality. But I think getting on my path and staying in my path and, you know, working on my self-esteem, working on all those different things, it changes you. You know, you get better with time. Embrace where you are. You know what I mean? Be real with yourself. I definitely believe that. My dad always told me the only person who's going to lose is you. So I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast episode. I hope you found it inspiring, insightful, whatever the case may be. If you decide to be a writer, I think it's really cool. We love to travel. We love coffee shops. We love reading. And it's a very beautiful life. You know, I could say it's a very rewarding life because you're always learning, you know, and I think to be able to exercise the human mind, you know, at every stage in your life is like, that's beautiful. You know, you're really using what it is that God is giving you and you're really taking care of that organ. And it's like, it's very powerful, you know, it's a very powerful organ. So it's like to just constantly be learning on an ongoing basis and being stretched and challenged and, you know, all those different things. It's entirely rewarding, you know, even if it's just on a personal level. So, peace.